Perry is currently the General Manager of the Los Angeles Economic and Workforce Development Department. She was appointed to this position by Mayor Eric Garcetti in 2013. She leads a staff of 175 and oversees 17 WorkSource centers, which offers specialized training and career development services. Prior to that, Jan Perry was, excuse me, on the Los Angeles City Council representing the 9th District for 12 years. The 9th District includes Bunker Hill, Little Tokyo, and South Los Angeles. Of course, while all these are very important accomplishments, to my opinion, the most impressive part of the Honorable Ms. Perry's bio is the thing that I mentioned at the beginning. She is an alum of the University of Southern California, School of Journalism, and with a master's degree in public administration for our very own Saul Price School. So I want to welcome Jan Perry.
I'm glad to be here today to share some of my experience with you, and I think because you can move down if you want, and because we're a smaller group, if you want to raise your hand while I'm talking, that's perfectly fine with me, and I'll answer your questions right then and there. I looked at our conversation today in the context of what's going on across the country, and as our national unemployment rate slowly declines, our city still has a stubbornly higher than national average rate of unemployment, and so that's where I look for the opportunity to create change and to create some momentum. Now, as was mentioned, I was selected to be the general manager of the Economic and Workforce Development Department last year, and our primary focus is to tie economic development initiatives to create employment opportunities. Now, based on my past experience, I can tell you firsthand that economic development can occur on a small scale or a grand scale. It can be simple, like adding neighborhood serving retail, like a grocery store or cleaners, or major projects like LA Live and Staples Arena and the JW Marriott. Either one should always support community growth and improvement to the economy. Now, the people who make the improvements, the investors, the builders, those who build the buildings to create the jobs that support and make the development possible, that final product, that outcome, that's the outcome that provides the long-term permanent employment opportunities. So, as you know, I mean, many of us work, and some of you I'm sure are working and going to school, you know, so you're paying your taxes. Yeah, I'm sure you hope to buy a home one day or something. And so, you know, your employment, your future employment is a building block for that. I have a daughter who graduated from University of Southern California just last year, and like many 22, 23-year-olds, she's out there hustling, trying to piece together 4 or 5 different jobs into one good job, and she's not there yet, but that's just the market, and that's the way it is now, and so young people really have to work a lot harder. You know, the growth of our market does create sustainability and that demand for more goods and services. So if you want to see an excellent example of what economic development looks like from a blank canvas to what it is now, and many of you I'm sure don't remember that LA Live and Staples Arena used to be a parking lot. It's miles and miles and miles of parking. And now when you go there, you know, on any given night, and particularly on the weekends, with the advent of the hotels, it's not only helped us at the convention center, not only has it lifted up and been catalytic for downtown, but I would argue for the region. It created 90,000 net new jobs, both in construction and permanent jobs. These were jobs that did not exist before. If you look at the past 12 to 15 years, downtown Los Angeles has become the fastest growing region in the city, or in the county. Now, I remember being here as a student, graduating undergrad in '77, and then again in '81 from graduate school, and looking north towards downtown. And there wasn't a lot between here and there, and the dramatic trajectory upward of new construction, new housing, new residential, not only for students and then with the onset of the new University Village, I would say to you that this area between SC and downtown is going to be transformed forever. Now, it wasn't an accident. It became a policy many years ago to try to take buildings that were empty or underutilized or lying fallow through an adaptive reuse ordinance. It was adopted by the City Council about 15 years ago. And it created this opportunity to take these buildings that were underutilized or empty and convert them into housing. So what that meant is we're finally bringing people into areas where no one lived before, and that creates demand. And so over 17,000 units of market rate housing was created in this manner. About 6,000 of those units were affordable units because we had a redevelopment agency at the time. But what it did is it brought people who wanted an urban lifestyle, who didn't really want a car all the time, so they wanted to be close to public transportation, and to have access to services in their neighborhoods, like a place to buy food, a place to take your cleaners, maybe a place to walk your dog, a place to, maybe have a family, just live there long term. So the investments and the services continue to grow. Restaurants and bars continue to proliferate. The dry cleaners, the dog groomers, dog boarding. Institutions like USC came down with a clinic to provide medical services because the market is just so good. So downtown has finally realized its full potential as becoming the economic engine for the region. All in all, in over a decade, during the time that I served, there was more than $15 billion in private investment made to develop what you see here now. That's $52 million of net new tax revenue over the next 20 years. So none of this happens in a vacuum. It does take a lot of work and includes not only the public investment, but solid policy to ensure that a measure of fairness was included in the decision-making process. So what that means is understanding the needs for goods and services to stimulate growth. It includes planning initiatives, transportation initiatives, housing initiatives, and to create a balanced, fully integrated socioeconomic community so that when a community begins to turn in another direction, people are not pushed out. Initiatives begin with good policy decisions, and when you have a good policy decision, ultimately it can lead to job creation. So I knew that good policy, public policy, should include how we provide for people who work to live close to where they work. I didn't want downtown Los Angeles to become like other major cities, for example, Manhattan, where there's been a tremendous loss of affordable housing. I thought it was important in a one-time, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make sure that we built enough, And that meant affordable workforce housing too. Housing for families, housing for seniors, housing for people who are homeless and living with disabilities. Housing for people like my daughter, people who are starting out, and people who are working, hotel and restaurant workers, and students like yourselves. So you have to look at how people use their power from the grassroots level to the office holder to understand how the best policy is made. It comes from knowing what exists in a community, having relationships, and where you want to take it collectively. Los Angeles Times recently showed a regional map depicting high concentrations of poverty, and it didn't come as a surprise to me that the areas with the highest levels of poverty also contain what accounts for most of the affordable housing. Now, this has remained essentially unchanged in Los Angeles for decades. So you ask yourself the question, why is that? Well, there's no mystery. Early Los Angeles was developed with restrictive housing covenants, keeping certain people out of newly emerging communities. Obviously, that wasn't smart. But it is smart today for so many communities to fight for the development of affordable housing. These are often the same communities that make the most noise about traffic. Now, if you don't want to make a provision for affordable housing in your community, then people are going to have to drive greater distances to get to work. So I want you to hold on to that thought. This is why I like downtown Los Angeles so much. It's a major employment center. We made those provisions for affordable housing to stimulate affordable housing development. We created the Affordable and Supportive Housing Trust Fund to be able to fund that. And the best part is that thousands of affordable housing units have already been built and created and preserved through solid policy making and will be retained as affordable housing units for the next 55 years. That's recorded and runs with the land. This is a basic requirement of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and what helps developers qualify for state tax credits and long-term maintenance of affordability. You've seen new bike lanes added and traffic slowing measures have been installed as downtown begins to emerge as much more of a pedestrian-oriented culture. Now the transportation infrastructure continues to happen with the creation of the downtown regional connector. And for those of you who have not seen the construction, it's just behind Disney Hall, facing the Red Cat Theater, which with, by the way, a residential tower right next to it and the Broad Museum on top of it. The regional connector is obviously going to support the convergence of the subway and the light rail throughout the region into downtown Los Angeles. So the reason I'm telling you this is because it all started with good public policy. Policies to make it possible to live and maximize what downtown had to offer. It came from policy decisions that included a way to finance the trust fund, the preservation of affordability of the remainder of the single-room occupancy hotels throughout the city of Los Angeles. Maybe some of you saw the story last week in the paper about the Roslyn Hotel at 5th and Main Street in downtown Los Angeles, the outcome of a good housing preservation policy. This large single-room occupancy hotel has been rehabilitated to provide affordable housing units for homeless veterans as well as working people. And there's about 8,000 such units of this type. They're commonly referred to as SROs. In the city, most of them are concentrated in downtown as part of our older housing stock. Transportation policy will help the economic outcome for people living and working in this area, and the future has people at places like Gensler, architecture firm, largest in the world, imagining downtown Los Angeles in the future, supporting a population of over 1 million people just in downtown with better management of our resources. So all of this activity translates into net new job potential, because when you do investment right, it will translate into more investment and it has an exponential growth effect. So as a former elected official and now as a general manager, I really can't emphasize enough the importance of giving investors the confidence to build here. Government does have a role to play in preparing our workforce for jobs that are created in emerging job sectors and to work with those institutions that provide job training for the incumbent worker, and that's somebody who's had a job and a career and lost it, and those who are unemployed and those who are starting out. When I reflect back over the last 20 to 30 years, policies like NAFTA, that it was established in the 1990s, resulted in so much of our manufacturing base disappearing and going into other countries. The most painful example of that is just here in South Los Angeles. South Los Angeles lost 75,000 manufacturing jobs and continues to be one of the areas of highest unemployment in the nation. California struggles with its own regulatory policies and the impact that they have on manufacturing and job creation. So now that I run this Department of Economic and Workforce Development, we administer federally funded job programs for people needing assistance in finding work and employers looking to add to their workforce. And we face many challenges, primarily to continue to receive funding at the levels that we are now and hope to grow, but highly unlikely. Los Angeles has a significant high school dropout rate and a significant number of adult workers who have not graduated from high school. There are about 750,000 people in this city who have not gotten past the 9th grade. And many of those individuals cannot read or write beyond a grade school level. And yet, many of the jobs that we have in this market, coming to this market, call for a skilled worker. There is a need for people who can read construction plans, spreadsheets, people who are computer literate. They need to be able to pass algebra to qualify for job training opportunities like electrical worker. If you've had your car repaired, you know the days of somebody simply rolling under your car with a wrench are long gone. Car repair requires computer skills now. Now, in the department that I run, we know we will not be able to get everyone in the city back to work, but we target young people who have dropped out of high school. We focus on them and provide them with wraparound services in an integrated service delivery model to prepare them for jobs that are here now and for the jobs that we think are coming. And I'm not talking about menial jobs, jobs that pay a good competitive wage, jobs that will allow people to grow and to be able to purchase housing and live in neighborhoods where goods and services are available in a sustainable community. Now, as I mentioned, we're funded by the federal government to assist people at our WorkSource centers. We have 17 WorkSource centers and 13 Youth Source centers throughout the city. And the centers are located primarily in neighborhoods where unemployment is the highest. Just to give you a snapshot, we have 4 centers between the Santa Monica Freeway all the way down to Watts. At the centers, clients are assessed for job training programs. Many are reconnected to education centers for the development of new job skills. We, again, locate where people need our help, and we focus on the vets, homeless, and also people who have had engagement with the criminal justice system, or as we refer to people who are re-entering our workforce. On the youth side, we focus on 16 to 24-year-olds, where we work collaboratively with our school district, the Los Angeles Unified School District, the community college, to coordinate our programs and to maximize successful client outcomes. Now, just yesterday, we get testimonials in on a regular basis from people who've come through our summer youth programs, through our WorkSource centers and our Youth Source centers. So I pulled a testimonial yesterday about a young lady who had dropped out of high school and had no idea what to do with herself, and she actually came into one of our youth centers, and she was able to work through the Higher LA's Youth Summer Youth Employment Program as a summer intern for auto repair at Los Angeles Trade Technical College. And that's just your neighbor just up the street. It's a 6-week program. It only costs $2,500 to fund a young person for 6 weeks so they can have probably one of the greatest experiences that will shape them as they grow and become adults on how to live. By fall, this young lady knew that she wanted more, and she came back to Trade Tech to enroll in more classes in automotive service. She joined the basketball team at the school. Now she's a full-fledged college student, so she went from a dropout to a college student. She is on her way to a career and a strong education, and she'll be able to take care of herself. We have people who have been in jail. One of our WorkSource centers on Vermont, there was a gentleman there. He was in his mid-50s, and he had been in prison for 27 of his 55 years. And if you think about that, think about all the technology evolution or revolution that he missed and came out of jail, as a much older person. And he went to the WorkSource centers, and they gave him very specialized training, computer training, basic skill set, and now he works at an oil company, and he's making over $30 an hour. He has full health and medical benefits, and he's got a good life. He served his time, and he has a good life. So many examples: vets, people who have mental illness, people trying to recover from Skid Row. Midnight Mission is another example of individuals who have come through there, been trained in catering, and have developed a client base so that the Midnight Mission is an employer and can put people back to work with training in the culinary arts. It is so much better to train people and put them back to work than to continue to step over them on a sidewalk. Now, when I say invest in jobs for everyone, I mean everyone. That comes from people who are highly educated as well as skilled workers. Our WorkSource centers are available to employers too. We coordinate recruitment efforts, job fairs, we serve as interview sites, and we help employers any way they ask, or we sometimes tell them what we think that they need. Because for us, it's really all about keeping Los Angeles working. Now, in December, we launched a website called jobsla.org, and that's jobsla.org. I suggest you all get on it. I think I must yell at my daughter every single day. Did you go on jobsla.org last night? Because it spiders databases every single night, and we get fresh listings every single night. The site has more than 500,000 jobs listed, and it continues to grow. We ask all of our employer partners to list their jobs, and we would love it if you'd list your resumes on the site too. It's a very powerful search engine, and it goes on government websites and private sector websites. Now, on the policy side of the employment equation, we have worked to include a provision for local hire in procurement for the city of Los Angeles as a preference for low-skilled workers. We've recognized the need to address employment at all ends of the economic spectrum, and so we know that success is going to bring more success. So it's a combination of good policy, good economics, good job training, and education. That leaves nobody behind. So that's always been my mission. So you can't talk about economic development without talking about building blocks for a community. That includes the jobs, the investment, the housing, the access to public transportation. So for communities that reject those building blocks, they will be eternally mired in gridlock. I want to give you a few thoughts to consider. Los Angeles needs to continue to create the best environment for investment and to prepare our workers for jobs that will build and sustain our communities, and the best available tools to develop policies that support that activity. So it's not just the job, it's the housing, it's the transportation, it's better school outcomes, and it's the recognition that change is something that can be embraced. So our workforce today is far more likely to adapt to change, especially younger people, more willing to train for jobs at any point in their career, and to be recognized for the many challenges that they face. That's what we need to do as policymakers, understand that challenges continue to morph and to move and to change. Public and private investment is always going to be needed to keep our city moving forward. And that's why I accepted your invitation today, because I like to hear what you have to say and what you see is on the horizon for not only for yourselves, but for our city and for the region. And so with that, I'd like to take any questions you might have.
Thank you for coming here to talk to us today about job creation, which is of great interest to me, and I assume to everyone in this room. We wonder, are we going to continue to face the challenge of job creation forever? Or is this problem a solvable problem? I fear that it is actually one that we're going to continue to face in spite of great efforts and great policy. That doesn't mean that the great efforts and great policy are for nothing, but I'd like to share a little bit why we might expect this to be something that continues to call on us to adapt to change. And I'd like to speak just briefly about one of my favorite economists and how he explains the salience and the enduring nature of job creation as a challenge for public policy. William Baumol is an economist who has a theory called Baumol's cost disease. And at its root is about technological change. The idea that of our goods and services, they're on two paths. There are some goods in particular where technology has allowed us to greatly increase our efficiency. So we all have in our pockets probably more computing power than many nations thought that they would ever have. Computers have become cheap, ubiquitous, small, friendly. Whereas other goods and services, particularly services, continue to be very costly to deliver. And here primarily we see healthcare and education. These two diverging patterns mean that an economy focused on goods that become increasingly fast and cheap and easy to produce creates relatively few jobs, and in particularly relatively few jobs that can afford to purchase the more costly services, the healthcare and the education services. And this is why I believe that this is not just an important concern here in Los Angeles, not just at this moment when we're still somewhat recovering from the housing crash and the Great Recession, but it will continue to be one of the great challenges of our time to reconcile these diverging paths of technological sophistication and services that are very hands-on and require a lot of human capital. So with that, I have a couple of questions I'd like to say is, well, with all this change going on, what advice would you give to a new USC graduate, either at the undergraduate or graduate level, looking to start their career in Los Angeles?
Okay, you have to be pragmatic and realistic. And you have to understand that getting the first job will lead to the next job. And you may not get the job that you want right away, but you have to get your foot in some door somewhere. So try to approximate what you think you'd like to do and target that. And to try, this is one thing that going to USC actually taught me very well, is, don't personalize rejection. Rejection is just, this is survival of the fittest out here and in the marketplace. And statistically, the more you put out there a volume of information about yourself, the greater the likelihood is that you're going to get a match, a hit, a connection of some sort, so that you can use that and leverage that to move yourself forward. And then I think you have to be receptive to, and I have had to change too, my skill set, particularly when it comes to computers and to social media and to all forms of communication. How many times have I gone to, I go to like a 14-year-old and say, could you help me with my phone, please? Because they are so much, they have no fear. And I finally got to the point where I realized, no, you can't break it. But, we didn't grow up like that. You guys did. But to know that you have to continually replenish. And if you have time, if you haven't done it already, learning another language is a really great thing, because that means that you open up even more doors. I started studying Spanish back in the Midwest when I was 15 years old. I've never stopped taking it. And it served me very well, not only as an elected official, but continues to serve me well just in my daily comings and goings and access to the media in not only English but in Spanish, and just going into other marketplaces. So that can be helpful to you. And then understanding the value of relationships, and I think USC teaches that very, very well. I think when I was a student here, maybe I thought we'd go to things like this and like, oh gosh, these people are in the room. But these people here, somebody's a future something in here. And maybe some of you already have an idea of where you're going to be. Some of you may end up in law school. Some of you may want to be developers. Some of you may want to go into finance. Some of you may want to be philanthropists or go to the nonprofit development community. Everybody in here is going to end up doing something significant. And so you savor this time you have just to know each other and to make that connection, not only face to face, but through social media, to kind of build who you are. These are your building blocks right now. And then, you just have to, well, the other thing that USC taught me is when you get knocked down, you get back up. This is a quality that I see over and over in students who've come from this university, many of whom I've hired over the years, many of whom started out as interns, and they were just so good that I actually put them on staff because they were relentless and they were tenacious and they were focused and they were driven, but they had values. They had a value system. It wasn't just about them. It was always about something greater than themselves, and they had this innate curiosity, and you throw the term around now, lifelong learners, but they were very enthusiastic learners. And if you can keep that about yourself, not let go of that, try not to get too jaded. I mean, I'm 59 years old. I am still enormously enthusiastic, and I still get very excited. It took me 13 years to finally get my dream job, but in the meantime, I did work in law firms, and I was working. The job, the penultimate job that I've had as a council person was utterly fulfilling because I was able to create and develop and to take a vision and to work with people in the community collectively to help them realize their dreams. And I'm happy to be doing what I'm doing right now also. It's a little bit different because I'm not a policymaker right now. I'm a delivery system. But it's all part of a larger pie, and it's given me a different kind of a perspective too, because now I see what it takes to deliver the services from a bureaucratic or from a bureaucracy standpoint. So each aspect of your life can be a building block to wherever it is you're supposed to end up in the long run. I'll tell you something else about relationships, and I'll answer your question. Just across the way over at Whitney House is a dear friend of mine, and I think it might be the Bedrosian Institute. He's the recently retired Chief Executive Officer of Los Angeles County. That's 10 million people. And he just retired, and he's just across the street right now, talking to the same kind of a group. And he is a tremendous connection. And I've known him for years. I mean, I just know him as Bill Fujioka. But it's what I'm talking about. You never know. I never would have dreamt that Bill would have become the Chief Executive Officer of the largest county, not only in the state, but probably in the country. And he's just across the street here on campus. So let me take your question.
I'm currently doing a consultation work with the LA Chamber of Commerce in LA, working on a grant from the Lumina Foundation. And the target is to do research on the pipeline of the workforce and employees and their education and where we are. A lot of the research and focus groups and interviews that we're doing with employers here in LA, we're finding out that there is a gap between what the employers are, the skills that they need to replace the retiring population with the new employees coming in and the education and the training that they're lacking. So my question to you is, in your department, are you considering that as maybe part of the economic development in the workforce? And what are you doing about it?
Well, our department is about 90% grant funded, so we're always on the hunt for money. And you know, so we follow the money out there, not only in the federal level, but private philanthropic money also. And as you know, that is the skills gap, as it's called, is a huge issue for people who have been employed and have lost their jobs and need to be retrained. So that's where you get the term incumbent worker. Basically, that means grown people who don't have a job and need to go back to work. And then to prepare younger people for the higher technological opportunities is being run out of YWCA, the Job Corps. It's a partnership with Xerox Corporation, where they're taking young people at the 9th grade level, following them through high school into their secondary education. They're training them in three-dimensional reproduction technology, so that once they complete their primary and secondary education, basically Xerox has invested enough time in these young people that they've created their own farm team. And they're trained and ready to go into their pipeline working in Xerox. That's really smart. There's a school in New York that does something similar. It's a STEM school, and I'm still doing some research on it, as I'd like to see if maybe we could try something like that out here, but it's a STEM school, science, technology, engineering, and math, and I think Xerox is a major funder of that educational institute. So that's a way to approach that. If I had the power to wave the magic wand to raise the minimum wage, I would couple that with a relief for the business that raised the minimum wage and then generated net new jobs. So it would come together as a package. An increased minimum wage with business tax relief if you generate net new jobs. Okay? So then there's an incentive for the employer, an opportunity for the worker, and then the public policy benefit. So that's just me thinking. Okay, so the rest of your question, tell me the rest of your question. You know, who's going to jump first? And you know, when the bigger city jumps first and the smaller cities actually could reap the benefit of the businesses who feel that they can no longer afford to stay in Los Angeles, and then they get a boost. I mean, you've always seen that tension between Los Angeles and Burbank and Los Angeles and Culver City or even Los Angeles and Long Beach. So, you know, there's got to be a fine balance so that you can retain as many businesses as possible, still attract as many businesses as possible. Because the thing, and I'll say this, it was always very frustrating for me, you have to have these businesses here to be able to put people to work, or else there will be no, you know, there's nothing for them to do. Then they have to go somewhere else, which is bad. So, you know, I don't know what the time frame is. I monitor it like you do by reading the newspaper and watching social media and looking what, you know, they're doing at all levels of government, but I don't know what the time frame is and what will be the break point. But like I said, if it was up to me, I would offer that 3-point package.
I'd like to hear about what entities or partnerships does your agency use to facilitate the workforce training? You talked about some of those anecdotes. Who facilitates those training, and then is that at no cost to the clients that you serve?
We have a contractor relationship with the WorkSource centers. They were awarded federal funds based on a competitive bidding process for their WorkSource centers. They had to demonstrate their viability, their sustainability, their ability to leverage both public and private funds, services, whatever, and then do it in such a way that strategically they could deliver to the populations that we needed for them to focus on, and to be able to do it for free. So each center has a little bit of a different emphasis. Some focus on travel, tourism, culinary arts, construction, trades, healthcare, biotech, green tech, renewable energy, transportation jobs, computer, straight up computer programming. But everyone has a little bit of a different spin. Some of that has to do with the fact of where they're located geographically too. This is such a huge city. I think it's over 440 square miles. And you know, when you get out into Sun Valley, you have a lot more, you know, trucking companies and manufacturing facilities. If you come down into the city, we have more service jobs and restaurants, bars, hotels, things like that. So again, it kind of depends on where you're located.
You mentioned transportation as it pertains to workers being able to access their jobs, and Professor Bornett's class were actually talking a lot about transportation policy and economic development. So I was wondering if you could just maybe share some of your thoughts on how the two go together. I'm studying transportation planning, so how I might be able to integrate the two. Because clearly they're related, but in many different ways.
I was the chair of the first phase of the exposition line. And I really felt like we had to push hard because this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to connect the east side to the west side and vice versa, to provide an east-west connection for individuals coming from the southern part of the city, to basically open up a door for them. And I knew that we wouldn't get that chance again. So at least on the first phase, we had some opposition, but we didn't have a lot of opposition because we mitigated most of the concerns. And while we got held up with a bit of litigation and mitigating the intersections and things like that, it was really a battle worth waging. And I can't tell you what an incredible sight it is to see the students getting off it's the blue line that becomes the exposition line, getting off at 23rd to go to Trade Tech, coming off with their bicycles, their backpacks, their books at night, and then coming down to SC, to see people take public transportation to come to a game en masse. It's just incredible. Or to come and partake of any of the great things that are here in Exposition Park. It has reawakened the economy, this sub-economy here, and enabled many of the museums to hire more individuals. When the new University Village opens up, again, it will create even more opportunity because it's easier for people to get here now and they don't have to drive. So they can spend that money on other things. When the line was under construction, I happened to be over at an architecture firm in the west side of town, and I was talking to younger architects, and they said that they were actually, they were buying property along the exposition line because they're architects, and they had the ability to, take a house or a building, an apartment building, whatever, and to, update it, fix it so they could live in it, and, have something that was affordable and sell their car, get rid of their car, or not buy a car, so they could spend it on the development of a property instead. We had many policies in place to encourage development along transportation corridors. One of the things that I did while I was in office is to offer a density bonus all the way down to Martin Luther King Boulevard, down Figueroa, for any developer who would come and build additional affordable units. Because again, Figueroa is a major corridor, Exposition's a major corridor, so it's close. I was standing up on the roof of a building the other day at Adams and Western. It's new construction, restoration of the Golden State Mutual Life Insurance Building, which is a legacy building, first African-American insurance company probably in the country, and they're building an additional office tower next to it. And I took a photograph out of the window of the legacy building looking towards downtown, and you can almost reach out and touch. I said, this is such an optimal opportunity to be able to build close to where people live, and I don't know why more attention is not paid to that, because all it does is put people back to work. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
You spoke a lot about kind of educational attainment and high dropout rates, and I would just be curious to hear a little bit more about what you think the solutions are from an education standpoint, if it's partnerships or charters or.
Well, one of the things that I witnessed for 12 years that I thought was most dramatic is adult education. Adult education, the funding has gradually and slowly been reduced over the last decade. And that's unfortunate, because when an adult gets educated, and I always went to all the graduations every June because I wanted to see who was graduating. And I can't tell you how compelling it is to see someone who's grown and who has children going from no education to getting their 8th grade certificate or getting their GED and then wanting more. That's an adult who can not only have a better life for him or herself, but if they have a family, they pull the rest of the family along too. Or to see parents graduating the same time their kids are graduating from high school. That's the ideal, which is achievable in every way. So I really feel like we can't let go of adult education. You know, there's no one answer to making sure that we close the skills gap, but I would say that given our economy, we do need to place a greater emphasis on the STEM or STEAM technology, and STEAM is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, to help young people develop greater analytical ability and to be very, very sensitive and aware of gender disparities and of cultural disparities, so that we can be smart about the way we craft programs to make sure that we pull people in. I was just watching a television commercial last night and I couldn't believe it. I won't say this because it's on camera and they'll probably come after me, but it was a cable television provider, and they were advertising for installers. And at first I thought the commercial was a joke, and then I realized it wasn't. I thought it was a parody, because every single person on the commercial, and they talked about, you know, to build yourself, to raise a family, to be, you know, to be an American, to be great, to be all these things, and every single one was a guy. And I thought, you know, this is crazy to do a commercial like that. I don't know who they hired as their PR company, but whoever did that commercial, I don't know, I think they're out of touch. You know, so there's lots of women in those kinds of jobs now, and eager to be in those jobs. I've spent years working with the National Electrical Contractors Association. I can't tell you how many women I've seen, you know, at their meetings or at their counseling groups, and they are always reaching out to women to pull them in.
What do you think can be done, both within your department and just generally, to address the skills gap in terms of immigrants? Los Angeles, obviously, home to so many immigrants, many of whom have found jobs in ways that seem like, wow, how did they find jobs? You know, many of them do, but a lot of them don't. A lot of them have really dead-end jobs, obviously. And with the new executive order from the president, there's going to be a lot more of them who are going to have work permits and be able to get formal jobs now. So, you know, I have a bit of experience with this personally. I, you know, seen at the economic development department, you know, there can be an initial attention that's given to immigrants in Spanish, for example, but then maybe, you know, it's just that very beginning that you can do in Spanish, and the rest of the assistance needs to be done in English. So, you know, what do you think can be done to really help immigrants, and especially low English level immigrants, move into?
We're creating strategy now, the working group in the city, run out of the mayor's office. The figure that we got, I think it's about 500,000 people who can go through this process just in the city alone, you know, with driver's license and, you know, the pursuant to the executive order that we must prepare to serve and to assist and support. And it's going to be very interesting, particularly with the change in Washington, as to how that changes and how we use our federally funded programs to help people. So that's a challenge right there. But in the midst of all that, what it screams out for is an integrated service model. So that's a model for people to deal with literacy issues, not only for parents, but to make sure that children are getting the support that they need. A model to support a family in whatever it might need. The family may need, transportation. The family may need, further education for one or both of the parents. A family may be an extended family and might need intergenerational daycare so that the parents can go to work while an elder parent is cared for during the day. So it depends. It's going to depend from family to family, individual to individuals, to what their needs are and how they're defined. So we as a city have to make sure that our partnerships are strong, not only with the County of Los Angeles that delivers the public health, the mental health care services, but through LAUSD and through the community colleges and healthcare organizations, covered California, to make sure that we're acting as at least a center or a hub for case management, referral, follow through, to make sure people get what they need to be successful as we go through this national transition. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be tough, but it's, again, another battle worth waging.
You talked a little bit about the bureaucracy that you have to work through now that you're kind of on the other side of things. And I'm interested to know, kind of from the 30,000 foot level, how do you coordinate this policy implementation across such a, well, I mean, it's a large geographical landscape as well as a large political landscape in LA County, but the city itself. And Mayor Garcetti has talked a lot about this, whether you want to talk about the practical aspects of street maintenance, and, fixing potholes and getting down to the nitty gritty, but taking care of that from a really high level as well. So how do you coordinate, whether it's transportation, economic development, or job training, or schools, or healthcare? How are we getting everyone on the same page to ensure that we are taking care of the least of these in the city, or those who are really struggling?
As long as you have people in place who can still move an agenda forward. People come to work for different reasons. Some people come to work because they just want a paycheck. Some people come to work because it excites them and they like what they do. And, so you have to recognize that and then take whatever energies people bring to the table and then push them to the next level. I have a core management team of people around me who help me implement not only the mayor's vision, but what I think is the most pragmatic and efficient way to achieve the goals that we set, not only the mayor sets, but we set for ourselves. And it's been a cultural change. Not only has it been a cultural change for me, coming from being able to say, okay, we need to go over here now, we need to go over here, but to take 180 people and say, this is what we're going to do, this is the time frame we're going to do it in, and this is the funding we're going to use to be able to achieve that, to go through the competitive bidding process on the WorkSource centers. They get all 17 of them opened up within 4 or 5 months, to rebid our WorkSource centers so that we can be much more hands-on in helping those 9 WorkSource centers that are embedded in people's communities deliver much more effective, in-touch, technology-driven services to the small businesses that are located in our communities, because actually in our economy, small businesses are the fastest growing portion of what our economy has to offer, not corporate headquarters, but the small individually owned and operated businesses, and even particularly for the immigrant community, that is the fastest growing portion of our economy. And so that's where we need to push and focus our resources. And this is another thing that USC taught me, you understand everybody's not always going to agree with you all the time. And that's okay, as long as you have a base of support and that you're heading in the right direction to move a community forward, and that they will benefit in a way that goes beyond just getting a bone, but having some equity, a stake in what will happen, and moving forward. So you get a lot of fights in public hearings.
Welcome to LA.
Yeah, welcome to LA, yes. Are you from LA?
I am not.
Where are you from?
The Midwest.
Which
Detroit,
part?
South Dakota.
Oh, okay. I'm originally from Ohio.
What role does the USC network play in your life today?
It plays a big part. I can't say that it doesn't, because it means a lot to me. It means a lot to me on a very personal level, and so I seek it out. And whenever SC calls me, or anybody calls me from SC and says, "Would you come and speak? Will you talk to the students?" I say yes, absolutely. I try to participate in alumni activities because I love it, and I come here a lot for speakers and for entertainment. But I wish they would ask me more. And while I don't mind going to the other school, it's not the same. It's just not the same, because I kind of see you. I see myself in you. So when I talk to you and I tell you about being tenacious and in the pursuit of whatever your goals are, I know you know what I'm talking about. I don't have to explain it, and when we say fight on, or when we say thank you to the Trojan family at an event where we're speaking, we all know what we're talking about. It's funny, when I was in council, there was a number of Trojans on council, and we do lots of things with USC, and we start, and the people would make fun of us, but they didn't I just think they don't necessarily understand that the bond here can be very deep and broad and substantive if you allow it to happen, and if you pursue it. So when I sit here in a classroom, I could be sitting on my computer, answering 1,000 emails. And I know that Bill Fujioka is just across the street. To me, this is what SC is all about. And then I have a chance to talk to you, and I'm happy that you've taken advantage of talking to me and asking me questions. Because maybe 10 years from now, who knows where either one of us will be. We may be able to help each other. And to me, that's what makes USC unique.
What do you think is the governing variable through South LA that has prevented the level of investment that other neighborhoods in LA have received? And I know it is a big question, but perhaps that's why I'm wondering, because there are so many reasons put out there for it. You
What are the
certainly know
reasons
it.
that are put out there for it that you know?
Well, I think its transportation network is very different than, say, your central LA when you go north of the 10, west of the 110. The employment centers are not in as convenient of locations there because it was built on more of a suburban housing model. There is an unquestionable racial legacy how that plays out, I don't know. But what you can sense that there is people still see a different or a not us in it, depending on who the people are speaking, of course.
Eventually you get to the point where you realize everybody wants the same thing. They want to be able to have a house, they want the street to be clean, they don't want couches and mattresses on their street, they want the kids to be able to walk to and from school and make sure that they get home in one piece. They don't want to have to duck every time they hear a loud noise. I'll give you two more recent examples of why I think development might be a bit stuck. They are the demise of the redevelopment agency and the loss of that development tool to be able to take property tax revenue or tax increment and to be able to invest it in communities that don't generate revenue, and redistricting. Redistricting severed South Los Angeles from its revenue generating hub, downtown Los Angeles. And I lived through that because the district used to include a large portion of downtown Los Angeles. And when that was tied to South Los Angeles, and we had a redevelopment agency to be able to create that finding of economic benefit, that economic nexus, to take property tax revenue that was generated in downtown and then invested in South Los Angeles, that's when you began to see change. A couple of projects you can go and look at that I did with tax increment on Central Avenue. There's 2 new grocery stores on Central Avenue with housing on top of each one, 20th and Central, Adams and Central. There's a brand new $12 million Silver LEED certified city building with a field office that I built at 42nd and Central. with a rooftop garden and, services on site. The Dunbar Hotel, which was a historic hotel that was built back in the 20s, but many well-known, very famous African-American people stayed there because of Jim Crow laws, segregation, fully restored through a mix of new market tax credits and tax increment, and then new housing up and down Central Avenue. I mean, you can just go see what progress was achieved, and the path was moving south. So when that revenue connection was severed based on politics, which is unfortunate, and we lost the CRA, now we have to look at other ways to fund projects, like tax credits, harder to get, more competitive, takes longer, EB5, investment, things like that, or to leverage transportation dollars. And that's why the Expo line was so critical, because now you have the east-west connection, and Crenshaw is such a critical project, and thank goodness they were able to work out the issue of where the line comes above ground to the satisfaction of the community, because that will generate more transit-oriented development and eventually get all the way to the airport. So then you begin to see the connections of an east-west, north-south grid that begins to level the playing field and to bring more equity into a community. Does that answer your question? I think people, eventually, they get worn out and they just say, I just want you to clean up my neighborhood. I just want a job. I just want my kids to graduate from high school and go to a decent college or get a good job, just a decent job. It's hard to live. This is a big city, a lot of stress.
So another thing economists consider about economic development is this idea of clustering, that economies are often very dependent on what tends to cluster there, whether that be pharmaceuticals or Silicon Valley. And of course, Los Angeles has been famous for a long time for being the entertainment industry cluster. And I actually hadn't heard you mention that in this entire talk. I'm wondering, are there some new clusters you see emerging or a changing role for the entertainment industry?
I don't think we should walk away, but you have to understand that a lot of the production jobs are highly technical. You're able to get those jobs through, connections and, apprenticeships and journey positions. And so I don't know if that's where we're going to put the greatest number of people to work, but if you think of the entertainment industry in a more expansive way, you think about the gaming industry and what we can accomplish through smart technology. I think then you begin to open it up more and then create a platform for startups, for entrepreneurs, for just expanding into new markets, and that's where the job growth and job opportunity. I was talking to a consultant yesterday, and she's been meeting with, I'm not going to name the names, but they're moving into the city, companies that search companies, try not to name names, but that they hadn't anticipated spending any money in Southern California to do outreach to people from other communities. And I said, so basically they're gonna move people from basically from one street over to the other, and they're gonna be the same people. And so where's the net new opportunity, especially for people who might not normally have access to that? And I said, would you talk to them and say, we're here as a department and we're here to help, and we can help feed them people if we can leverage our resources with theirs to give people they might not have thought of an opportunity. So I'll see what the answer is, and I'm sure it'll be a positive one. So, I've had to expand my view of what it means to be in the entertainment industry too.
Right.
And so that way you create a greater opportunity. But I was over at Dorsey High School. I think they were in the 10th grade. They were in the computer coding class. And it's a learning community, so they had their sweaters on and their laptops, and the people who were attending the class were basically their parents' age. and you could see their enormous patience with us, you know, and they took us through a game, like, you know, the way you talk to maybe a 6-year-old, or, you know, like, you do it like this, and, you know, it was nice, though, because to see these young people teaching the adults is, I have to remember that we can learn from younger people about what's ahead, because they're already doing it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.